In 1769, on the rugged island of Corsica, a boy named Napoleon Bonaparte was born. He was not rich, but he was full of dreams. As a child, he read stories of great warriors and leaders. He imagined himself one day leading armies and making history. When he was just 9, his father sent him to France to study in a military school. He was small, shy, and had a strong Corsican accent, but he worked hard and learned fast. By the time he was a young man, France was in chaos. The French Revolution had begun, and everything was changing. Kings and queens were gone, and people were fighting for power. Napoleon saw a chance to prove himself. He led troops in battle and won surprising victories, especially in Italy. The French people began to see him as a hero. In 1799, he took a bold step. With support from the army, Napoleon overthrew the weak government and took control of France. A few years later, he crowned himself emperor. No longer just a soldier, he was now the ruler of a mighty nation. But would Napoleon's dream last? Hello, my friends. It's me. Welcome to our channel, where we bring history to life for you. Today we begin an exciting journey through the adventures and achievements of one of the most famous men in history, Napoleon Bonaparte. Over the next few weeks, we will explore his rise to power, his battles and his defeats, his triumphs and his failures. We will discover what made him such a brilliant military leader and controversial figure, and we will learn about the lasting impact he had on France and the world. So let's start at the beginning. How did this Corsican boy become one of the most powerful emperors in history? Let's find out. Chapter 1. A boy from Corsica. Corsica is an island in the Mediterranean Sea. It is known for its beautiful beaches, its rugged mountains, and its rich history. Corsica has been ruled by many different people over the centuries, including the Romans, the Arabs, and the Spanish. But in the 18th century, it was a part of the Republic of Pisa, which was a small Italian state that controlled several islands in the Mediterranean. Napoleon Bonaparte was born in the town of Ajaccio on August 15, 1769. His father, Carlo, was a lawyer and landowner. His mother, Maria, was the daughter of a local nobleman. Napoleon was the second of 8 children, so he wasn't expected to inherit much money or land. When he was 9, his father decided that the best way to advance his son's career was to send him to mainland France to study. So Napoleon left his family and his home and traveled to the city of Paris. It was a difficult journey for a shy and unconfident boy, especially because he couldn't speak French very well. He had a strong Corsican accent and was teased by his classmates. But Napoleon was determined to succeed. He studied hard, learned the language quickly, and excelled in his classes. He also developed a passion for French literature and history, which would shape his view of the world. By the time he was a teenager, Napoleon was a brilliant student, but he didn't have enough money to continue his education. So he entered a military academy instead. This was a good choice, because France was at war with many other European countries, and there was a need for young officers. Napoleon graduated top of his class and was given a position in the army in Corsica. He was finally able to use his skills and prove himself in the battlefield. But his time in Corsica was short-lived, because soon he was called to fight in the French Revolution. Chapter 2. Rising through the ranks. The French Revolution was a period of radical social and political change in France that began in 1789 and ended in 1799. It was a time when the French people overthrew the monarchy and established a republic. It was also a time when there was a lot of violence and instability in France. Many people lost their heads literally because they didn't agree with the new government. When Napoleon heard about the revolution, he was excited to go back to France and make a name for himself. He returned to Paris in 1793 and joined the Committee of Public Safety, which was a group of people who were responsible for protecting France from its enemies. Napoleon was in charge of defending France from foreign invaders. He did a good job and was promoted quickly. He also met some influential people who would help him later in his career, but he also made some enemies who would try to destroy him. One of Napoleon's biggest challenges was the war against Austria and Britain. These two countries wanted to put the king back on the throne and restore the monarchy in France. Napoleon led troops into battle and won some important victories, especially in Italy. He was considered a hero and was celebrated by the French people. However, he was criticized by his enemies for being too ambitious and wanting more power than he was supposed to have. They accused him of being a dictator and said he was trying to take over France. Napoleon denied these accusations, but he knew that he needed to do something to secure his position in France. So he came up with a plan. In 1799, Napoleon led a group of soldiers to a place called the Bridge of Arcole. He pretended that he was going to attack the Austrians, but actually he was planning to overthrow the weak government in France. With the help of his friend, Paul Barras, Napoleon managed to take control of France and became the first consul. This was a position that had almost the same powers as the king, but it was not a hereditary title. Napoleon held this position for a few years until he crowned himself emperor in 1804. But before he could become emperor, he had to deal with some problems. First, he had to keep the peace in France. The country was still recovering from the revolution, and there were many people who were unhappy with the new government. Second, he had to continue the war against Austria and Britain. These countries were still trying to invade France and put the king back on the throne. Third, he had to manage his reputation. Many people in France and Europe knew him only as a general who had won some battles in Italy. They didn't know much about him personally or how he felt about being an emperor. Napoleon had to be careful and smart to solve these problems. He needed to show the French people that he was strong and capable of leading the country. He needed to show his enemies that he was powerful and not afraid of them, and he needed to show the whole world that he was more than just a soldier, but a great emperor who could bring glory to France. Chapter 3. The Empire Expands. Napoleon was a brilliant strategist and tactician. He knew how to use his army to defeat bigger and stronger opponents. He also knew how to take advantage of his enemies' weaknesses and turn their strengths into liabilities. For example, in the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805, Napoleon faced a huge army of Russians and Austrians led by Tsar Alexander I and Emperor Francis II. Napoleon was outnumbered 3-1, but he managed to defeat them both. He lured them into a trap by pretending to retreat and then attacked them when they were exhausted. He also used smoke bombs and artillery to confuse and disperse their troops. He was also very lucky because a storm destroyed many of the Russian bridges and prevented them from escaping. That day, Napoleon became famous as the Little Corporal who beat the Tsars. As Napoleon conquered more land, he also spread his ideas and influence. He introduced many reforms and innovations that helped improve the lives of the people he ruled over. For example, he created a new legal code called the Napoleonic Code, which made laws more fair and equal for everyone. He also set up schools and universities to educate the next generation of leaders and thinkers. He also respected and protected the cultures and religions of the people he conquered. He was not a fanatical or intolerant ruler like some of his rivals. However, not everyone liked Napoleon's rule. Some people thought he was too harsh and autocratic. They didn't like that he censored the press and punished those who opposed him. Other people thought he was too greedy and ambitious. They didn't like that he kept expanding his empire and fighting more wars. Still, others thought he was too French and nationalist. They didn't like that he imposed French language and customs on the people he ruled over. But despite the criticism, Napoleon remained popular among many people in France and Europe. They saw him as a hero, a liberator, a modernizer, and a legend. They also admired his charisma, his courage, and his determination. They loved him or hated him. No one could ignore him. And now we come to the end of part 1 of Napoleon Bonaparte, the Emperor's Journey. What do you think? Do you like Napoleon? What do you admire or dislike about him? Tell us in the comments below. Also, don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. We have lots of adventures planned for Napoleon, and you are invited to join him on his journey. See you next time. Chapter 4. The Fall Begins. Napoleon ruled France for many years. During that time, he made lots of enemies. Not everyone liked how he took control of Europe. Many people wanted him gone. But after his victory at the Battle of Nations, no one dared to act. That is until 1812, when Napoleon made a terrible mistake. He decided to invade Russia. For weeks, his army marched across the land. Soldiers were proud to be part of Napoleon's Grande Armée. They wore fancy uniforms and carried weapons that gleamed in the sun. As they moved through Russia, the locals watched them in amazement. Then, the Russians started retreating. This made Napoleon's job harder, because whenever his troops approached a city, the Russians would burn it. Entire villages and farms disappeared in flames. This made it hard for Napoleon's army to find food and supplies. But Russia is huge. Even though his soldiers were tired and hungry, they had to keep marching. Winter arrived and it was very cold. Thousands of soldiers froze or starved to death. Some tried to take their own lives rather than give up and become prisoners. Those who lived did not want to go home without honor. They also did not want to admit that Napoleon was wrong. So they told their emperor everything was fine. They said the army was strong and ready to fight more battles. But it was not true. One by one, the Russian army took more land, pushing Napoleon's troops farther into Russia. Eventually, Napoleon realized he could not win. In October 1812, he began retreating. When he finally crossed the Niemen River into East Prussia, only 40,000 men remained in his army. He had lost more than half of his troops. Europe now knew he was not invincible. Soon after, the Russians, Prussians, Austrians, and British joined forces to stop Napoleon once and for all. They wanted to end his rule and take back the land he had stolen. In 1814, Napoleon was defeated and had to give up the throne. He was sent to a small island called Elba, far from France. No one thought he could do anything from there. Everyone believed his story was over. Chapter 5. The Last Battle. The island of Elba was small, just 5 miles across. Napoleon lived there with his wife, son, and a small group of guards. They gave him nice accommodations, a large house with a beautiful view of the ocean. But even that could not make him happy. He missed France. He missed the power and glory. Most of all, he missed the respect. While living in Elba, Napoleon would talk about how he used to rule Europe. He claimed he was the best leader, and France was stronger because of him. He said he was too good for the common people, that they did not understand his greatness. While he was talking, he planned his next move. Napoleon's mind was like a weapon, always sharp and ready to attack. He was waiting for a chance to return to power. In early 1815, something happened that made Napoleon believe his time had come. The King of Sweden was visiting the island. He was a young man who needed a teacher. Who better to teach the king about ruling a country than the most famous ruler in Europe? Napoleon thought maybe if he impressed the King of Sweden, he would help him return to France. But it did not happen. The king left, and Napoleon got even angrier. That same year, an event took place that gave Napoleon his chance. A ruler in the Netherlands suddenly became sick. It seemed as if he might die. This gave Napoleon an idea. If he quickly took over the Netherlands, then when the ruler recovered, he could demand to keep it, or he could declare himself Emperor of France once again. He decided to try it. On February 26, 1815, Napoleon escaped the island of Elba. He traveled with 6 men in a small boat. The trip was dangerous, but they made it. From there, he went to a nearby town and raised an army. Once again, he was like a magnet for soldiers. They loved him and wanted to follow him. In just 2 weeks he had enough soldiers to march on Paris. On March 20th, Napoleon arrived in Paris. People cheered when they saw him. Soldiers saluted their emperor. The King of France ran away, leaving his throne behind. Napoleon was back in power. For the second time, he was the most powerful ruler in France. But other European rulers were ready this time. They formed a big army and prepared to fight. On June 18th, 1815, Napoleon fought his final battle at a place called Waterloo in Belgium. It was a long and bloody fight. The British and Prussian armies were too strong. They crushed Napoleon's forces. It was the end of his story. He was captured and sent to St. Helena, a lonely island in the South Atlantic Ocean. This time, there was no escape. Chapter 6. The End of the Emperor. St. Helena was very different from the places Napoleon was used to. The island was rocky and grey, the soil was poor, and it was very windy. For a while he was angry that he had to live on such a boring island. He threw things, broke furniture, and screamed at the guards, but soon he calmed down. He built a house near the coast. He planted grass seed and flowers. He walked every day in the gardens and enjoyed the peace. He spent his time writing letters, reading books, and thinking about his life. He talked often about his battles, his empire, and how history would remember him. Years later, a scientist who visited the island said Napoleon seemed happy. He was well-dressed and well-fed. He loved to walk in the gardens, watch the waves crash, and listen to the birds. But Napoleon's mind was still sharp. He remembered every battle he ever fought. He could tell anyone who visited the island all of the details of every single war. He also loved to argue. He hated when people criticized him, even if they were right. Sometimes he felt like he could still be in charge. He held little ceremonies in his home and made the scientists and doctors salute him. All the while, Napoleon's health was getting worse. He had stomach pain, headaches, and heart problems. He knew he might die soon. One day in 1821, he called his doctor. He was in pain and could not eat. He had been ill for months and was very weak. The doctor prescribed medicine, but it did not help. 5 days later, on May 5th, 1821, Napoleon Bonaparte died. He was 51 years old. When news of his death reached France, people cried. They mourned the loss of their great leader. Soon after, his body was brought back to France. People lined the streets. They wanted to see their beloved emperor one last time. In Paris, hundreds of thousands of people gathered. They watched as his coffin was carried to a grand tomb in the basement of the Invalides. There he rests today, one of the most famous rulers in history. Napoleon had a complicated life. He did many good things and many bad things. He helped bring democracy to France. He advanced the way the government operated, and he created a strong economy. But he also wanted power more than anything. He was willing to do whatever it took to get it. In the end, his desire for power caused his downfall. Today, we remember him as one of the greatest military leaders in history. We study his battles and try to learn from his decisions. Many people believe he was the greatest leader France ever had. Others say he was a dictator and destroyed the revolution. Maybe the truth is somewhere between these two ideas. Maybe Napoleon was a mix of good and bad. He was ambitious, brave, and brilliant. But he was also selfish, greedy, and stubborn. He was a hero to some and a monster to others. It is up to you to decide what you think of Napoleon. What do you admire most about him? What do you hate? Was he a hero or a villain? Let us know your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.